good evening, everybody. So you're going to have to bear with me. I don't have a microphone, so we have Yukio on a microphone here in a second. But before we start today, one of the things we've tried to do recently when it comes to any of our programs here at the Historical Museum is to read a homeland statement. So I'd like to read that for you here. The Historical Museum at Fort Missoula acknowledges that we are in the homelands of the Salish and the Kalispel people. We offer our respect for their history and culture, and for their wisdom in caring for this place for generations to come. I'd also like to do a couple thank yous today. First, I want to thank Ron from MCAT for coming out this evening to film the program for us. And the other thing I do need to mention, and this is kind of a running joke around our office, this talk is actually funded by Humanities Montana grant, which we're incredibly grateful for, but it just so happens to be a grant that happened 4 years ago. Imagine in fall of 2019, we got funding for a series of programs. And since that time, we've been able to do one of those programs, and we've had Yukio on our list to come back here and visit us. He'd done a program prior to that, but we hadn't had the opportunity to do that. So this is our pre-COVID Humanities Montana grant that we do thank for supporting us for a project like this. So with that, I'm going to read Yukio's introduction, and I'll introduce him, and I think we're all excited to hear you talk to him, Yukio. So. Yukio Shimomura was born in San Francisco and was in grade school when World War II started. His family was incarcerated and he was evacuated to a camp in San Bruno, California, referred to as the Tanforan Racetrack, and later came to a camp near Delta, Utah, which we know as Topaz. After the war, the family relocated to Ogden, Utah, where he graduated high school. He'd later go on to attend Weber State University and Utah State University, earning a bachelor's degree in manufacturing engineering. He worked at HP as an engineer and transitioned into human resources. He held several positions in American and Japanese electronics companies. His last position was as director of human resources. He's consulted with several companies in management, coaching, and team building, and he currently resides in Morgan Hill, California. And I do have to also offer a belated happy birthday to Yukio. Was it Sunday, Yukio? 88. Yeah. So Yukio just turned the young age of 88, and we're just very incredibly pleased to have you here, Yukio. So with that, I will turn it over to you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.
I can't tell you how happy I am by being here. You could tell I'm even emotional just at the beginning, and I'm surprised at myself. But to be invited by Matt and Christiana again to present in what I consider to be God's country, the big sky, I'm so happy about that. And then to have it, right after my birthday is very incredible. I'm fortunate enough at 88 to be able to speak to you. Now, when you turn 80, what happens is things pop in, ideas pop in, and ideas pop out real quickly. And so then if you don't capture the idea, you're in trouble. And so that's why I use so many slides, because the slides speak for themselves. So I'm just trying to make sure that I do things factually, and I don't use any alternative facts. And if you think about Pinocchio, my nose is so flat that they can't accuse me of lying. So I'm just telling you right up front that I'm going to do my best to continue keeping my flat nose, and I just want you to know that I'm happy to be here. I'm very grateful for Matt and Christiana to have me invited. And so I'm going to try my best to give you some information that you may not have had. And I just want to fill in some of the holes, because there are people who are here that know about the camp. I have one woman here, and her name is
Tomiko.
Tomiko.
Yeah.
She's 90 years young, and I believe she might be the youngest or the oldest person in this room. Is that right? 90? Is anybody older than 90 in here? Okay.
I'm 90.
You win. All right, this is my family. And can we turn the lights down just a little bit? On the second row is my dad, on the left, my oldest brother, my mother, my 4 cousins, and on the first row is my auntie, my grandmother, my uncle, and that little guy sitting between those big people is me, and my next older brother. So I'm the only one that's alive now. All the rest are gone. So let's just go through this real quick. I usually do this with other groups, but this is a special group. So I'm going to start. How many are under 60? Oh, we got a young group here tonight. Okay. How many are 60 and above? Nice. 70. That's nice. 80. And 80s and then 90. So I really appreciate the turnout. How many have you served in the service? All right. Appreciate your time. How about, do we have any Gold Star parents in here? No? Okay. When I was giving this presentation before, a woman walked up to me and said, you know, you got to recognize the Gold Star moms and dads and families. And so I thought, well, I'm going to do that from now on. Have you heard of these words before? Executive Order 9066? Incarceration versus relocation. We're going into semantics right now, okay? It could be the same for you. How many of you heard of Tanforan?
I've heard of it, but
Okay.
never been
Huh?
there. I've heard of it, but never been there.
Okay. Delta, Utah.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Topaz. Okay. Tule Lake. Oh, maybe this lecture is over. You guys have heard about all this, so. 442nd Combat and the 100 Battalion. Okay, we'll talk about that. Okay, my family was in San Francisco. That's my mom and dad's wedding picture. And the men didn't smile at all. I don't understand how this picture was taken, but he's very stern looking. My mother barely cracked a smile on her face. So this is back in the 20s. They came over from the Japan right after the earthquake. The earthquake devastated the economy in Japan, so my uncle and auntie sponsored them to come to the U.S. There's my mom and dad, my grandmother, myself, and my 2 brothers and myself. This is at 1872 Bush Street in San Francisco. My mother was a soloist in a Christian church and a pianist and an organist, and my dad was a traveling salesman who covered the western states from Montana, Colorado, Utah, and so everything was going smooth, hunky-dory and all that. Here's a picture of my grade school when I was going, and back in the early 40s. That little guy on the left holding the daisy is me. I'm one of the original flower children of San Francisco. So this school still exists in San Francisco. It's just, but I thought this is a good way to start because this is how innocent I was at that time. So December 7th was the day that screwed everything up in my life. And what's interesting is it screwed everybody's life at that point in time. Now, for those of you who are in the 80s, maybe you heard your parents at that time, or if you're in the 70s, you heard at that time that what they had to go through during the war. And so this is where, if you know of what happened during the war, it would be very interesting to pass this on to your grandchildren and children so that then they get a sense of what happened. Because I'm going to give you a sense of what happened to the Japanese during this time, because there's a lot of people who really don't know what happened. So the attack was in Pearl Harbor. Now, this is a statement that was made at the time. A Jap is a Jap. It makes no difference whether he is an American citizen or not. He's still Japanese. The Japanese race is an enemy race, and while many have become Americanized, the racial strains are undiluted. Sabotage and espionage will make problems as long as he's allowed in the area. The very fact that no sabotage has taken place to date is disturbing and confirming indication that such action will be taken. Now, this is, you can say that this is what he believed in. And then he also went to Congress to say, hey, we need to get all the Japanese off the West Coast and everything else like that, regardless of whether you're born in the United States or not, okay? So General DeWitt won the battle to get us off the coast. And to this day, there's a lot of people who have feelings about him and what he did, and they call him General Nitwit. Okay. Ousted all the Japs off the count. And so the reason why I show this one is Japs is a very derogatory word, and some people still use that word to describe the Japanese people. And all I ask you to do is refrain from using it, because it is a short name, but it has a lot of feelings to it. It's like the N word, and you know what I'm talking about, okay? This is a picture of the executive order. And so in the executive order, all people of Japanese, both alien and non-alien. So you got to get a hold of that right there, is non-alien. What that means is American citizens. And so must be evacuated by 12 o'clock Pacific Western Time, May 11th. Okay, how many of you are farmers or were farmers? Okay, go, a couple. That'd be an interesting point, because if you're a farmer, you've already plowed the ground. Well, maybe not in Montana, but in California, the ground's been plowed and ground's been seeded and fertilized, and so then at least that part of it is done. Now, no Japanese in that area will be changed residents without permission. So, what I'm trying to say here is, it's starting to happen. The government at that point in time took it upon themselves to say, we will make the decisions for you, and we will tell you when to do something, what to do something, and how to do something. And this is what it's all about, this is the beginnings of when it occurs. No Japanese in the area you'd be able to change residents without permission. So now they got you nailed down, okay? We'll provide services with respect to leasing, sales, storage, real estate, professional. How many of you have businesses? Okay, that's too bad. The reason why I say that is You're going to find out in a minute. What would be interesting to have us all do, just in order to get a feel for what's going on, is for us to pretend that we're Japanese. Okay, I'm just saying pretend. Okay, I'm not, your hair's not going to turn black and your eyes are not going to turn brown. It's just pretend. So that in the next few minutes, if you pretend it and if you internalize what's going on, you'll say to yourself, what the hell is going on? Okay, and I'm not teaching you any new words or anything like that. Okay, here we go. You're going to report to the Civil Control Station for further instructions. Okay, evacuees must carry with them on departure. Now, this list is everything you can carry, you can take. Everything that you can carry, you can take. So you say, okay, bedding and linen. Okay, well, okay. You say, toilet articles. How much do you take of your toilet articles? I don't know. How long are you going to be gone? I don't know. When are you coming back? I don't know. So it's very perplexing to think that you don't know what your future is going to be like. So you say toilet articles, extra clothing. Okay, when you go on a vacation, or 2-week vacation, or a 4-week vacation, you sort of know what to pack. But then on the other hand, if you don't know how long you're going to be gone, and you also don't know what kind of climate you're going to go into, what are you going to pack? And so sufficient knives, forks, spoons, plates, bowls, and cups. That's sort of simple. And then essential personal effects. What does that mean? Okay, so these are things that right off the bat you're being told what to do. How many of you have pets? Oh, that's too bad. You can't take your pets with you. You have to leave them with somebody or the SPCA if that fits for Montana. And so the parting between you and your animal, your cat, your dog, or whatever other animals that you might, it becomes a very emotional issue, okay? And right there, it starts to grab you because you're being told what to do with even your pet because you can't take your pets with you. So they say, well, we'll provide storage for ice boxes. Ice boxes on the list because how many people had refrigerators in the early 40s? Only the people who can afford it, right? And washing machines, we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's no laundromats either, right? Who's going to carry a piano on their back to go into the camp? That's crazy. Okay. Other heavy furniture. So what's going on? The new reality. So here it is again. You must obey orders. You have no choice. None. And then you have to, in the Japanese culture, you don't openly complain. You mutter to yourself, but you don't put it out in the open. And you must not embarrass, meaning that you don't want to attract attention to yourself. So the Japanese words that I just wanted to give you a couple of them is shikata ga nai, which means too bad, so be it, this is the way it is. And the word gaman is a word that you're familiar with, but in this kind of context, it means be stoic. Keep it to yourself. And the last one is the good one, is no monku, which is no bitching. And so how can you avoid that, right? I mean, with all of what's going on. So when I asked my parents, I used to say, hey, Mom and Dad, what's going on? And their response was, I don't know. What's going to happen? I don't know. Where are we going? I don't know. So where does that leave me? Confused and worried, right? So this is the way it was, 127,000 total Japanese in the United States. There's 110,000 on the West Coast. 40,000 of the 110 was born in Japan. And then the 70,000 were American citizens, okay? So there were some people that went to Japan and got educated, came back. That's what we call kibes. And then 1/16, if you have 1/16 blood, then I think they got this from the indigenous people when they said, how much of you are indigenous or Indian? And then they took that and took it in. Now, here's an interesting scenario that I go over. What is your name?
Marissa?
Marissa? Let's say Marissa and Yukio got into a relationship. And then we got a little bit hot and heavy, and then I said to Marissa's parents, I'd like to marry your daughter. And they said, sure, no problem. And so then I go to my parents, oh, no problem. So we get married, and then we have a couple of kids. Now, with her blonde hair, and what color are your eyes?
Blue.
Blue. I hope it was blue. So we have two kids, blonde hair, blue-eyed, and Marissa in the camp. Now, how do you think she's going to be treated by all the other Japanese? Not good. Not good at all, because they're all Japanese, and here we have the lone woman, okay? And so then she says, you know, it's uncomfortable. I need to get out. So she's given permission to get out. Now, she goes into the community. Now, let's say her kids are now black-haired and brown-eyed, and she's in the community with her kids. How do you think the kids will be treated outside of the camp? So the irony of this whole thing is there weren't that many interracial marriages at that time. But the ones that were married that had kids, they had a hell of a time. And I understand that there are several women that had to leave because they were being harassed and things like that. So this is where, you know, no matter how you talk about the war has so many ironies to it, and I'll go into some more, but this is one of them that was really pretty heavy duty. Okay, so we're all lined up to get registered, and there you see a soldier with a weapon guarding, I don't know what. And there's the signs, and then here's a storekeeper. Hey, I'm an American. And the next one is, my family friend is 1 day to go, and he's gonna shut down. So the business owner is shutting down. What do you do with your accounts receivable, accounts payable, all your equipment that you have? And you say, oh, I can sell it. Okay, so what do you think you're gonna get for the equipment that you have in the store? There you go, you took the words right out of my mouth. Pennies on the dollar. So it was hard on everybody. And then the farmer that just planted the seeds and everything, can you imagine just walking away from that? Just walk away. You had no choice. If you didn't go, you were persuaded very heavily by the soldiers and their rifles. And so then you say, yeah, I think I better go. And so luckily for some farmers, the Japanese farmers were able to sell their land to a friend, and the Caucasian friend, and they sold the farm for $1. And then when they came back, and the farmer took care of the harvest and everything, and because he harvested it, he got the profit from it. Then when the Japanese farmer came back, that farmer sold that farm for $1. Those are rare stories, but those are good stories. But you can imagine if you were renting or leasing or whatever, you'd be heartbroken because you had to just walk away. So when you're renting a home, you walk away. If you own a home, who's going to take care of it for you? A lot of the homes that were owned by Japanese people were vandalized, and it was hard. And then when they vandalized, then what they did was they moved into the house and stayed there until they were kicked out. But you can imagine having somebody move into your house and you have to kick them out. That's horrible, okay? How many of you own cars right now? Of course. So these are the cars that were, you had to put the cars into a facility like this. And, you know, I'll talk to the men right now. If you had a 6-volt battery, how long is that 6-volt battery going to last under those circumstances? And if you had tube tires at that time, right? Tube tires aren't going to stay up very long. They're going to go flat. Well, the interesting thing is all these cars, half of the cars were given away to families that needed the car. Then the other half were just given to the used car dealers because they wanted to get rid of the car. Because you were not able to take the cars to the camp because they didn't want you to escape in that car, right? So these are signs that were in the Japanese community at that time. Buy bonds. How many of you bought bonds at school? You bought stamps, if I remember right. I bought stamps to buy bonds, right? Do you remember that? Yeah. Okay. Here's a good one. This guy up there on the roof looking out, looking for the signal. And you got Washington, Oregon, California, you got all these people lined up. They're all given TNT. Pure propaganda at that time, okay? Now, who's the cartoonist that did this? Dr. Seuss. If you look on the internet right now and you look up Dr. Seuss and you look up propaganda, you'll see all of the artwork that he did with the Germans and the Japanese propaganda. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because he was a starving artist. I'll put it that way. I'll give him that. But I don't buy Dr. Seuss's books to give to my grandchildren at all. I'll just say, okay, no, I'm not going to give it to you. I'll buy somebody else. Okay, here's the interesting one. You say, were there anybody that didn't want to go to the camp and they wanted to stay out? And so then I have a list of 3 people here named Yasui, and he defied the curfew. And the punishment for what he did was 1 year in jail, okay? Then Gordon Hirabayashi was a student, and he was arrested, and he was given 2 years in jail. Now this was the interesting one, is Fred Korematsu. He didn't want to go to camp because he wanted to stay with his Italian girlfriend. And so all of these cases went to the Supreme Court, and after so many years, all of these charges were vacated. But then on the other hand, these guys had to take the punishment. So we'll just keep going here. Here we go. Take what you can carry. Here's the guy with now he's got a bayonet there. The soldiers are all lined up for Santa Anita. So we're going to go to a place called Tan Foran. It's a racetrack that was established in 1899. Now, we're going to go there in 42. Okay, that's 40 years of racing season. So there's the grandstand building right there. And the barracks were built inside the track. Now, the reason why racetracks were so popular to put the camps in because it was already large acreage and a big fence around it, okay? So that makes sense. But what doesn't make sense to me is that there were 50 stables, 25 back-to-back. What they did was they rinsed out the floors and they put linoleum on the floor. Maybe they whitewashed the walls. And they used green lumber to make these horse stalls. So you can imagine when the wood dried, there'd be at least a half an inch between each board. So how much privacy do you think these neighbors got? And so then there's so many years of racing season. And so how many of you remember that green liquid with a wick on it called Airwick? How many of you used Airwick in the past? Oh, you're not that young. Come on. Okay. I'll give you another one. How many gallons of Febreze would you need in order to cover the smell? Now you identify with it, right? Okay, that helps. And so then, how many of you own horses? Okay. When you have a horse and they're in the stable, do you train them to stomp their foot against the wall so that then they could give you the signal that they have to go? Right? Bang, 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 bang. No way. They're going to go wherever they're standing, and they don't give a damn where they go. And so then you got 40 years of urine and manure that gets cleaned out, but then all that stuff soaks through, right? So the people that were in these quarters, horse stables, when they came out, they stunk. Now, again, how much Febreze do you need to have to cover that smell, right? How much perfume or cologne or whatever, you know, you just can't get away from it. So this is where whoever planned this said, they're in a protected area, so let's not worry about it. They'll be okay. But yet, how comfortable would you be if you were asked or told to go into this kind of environment? And that's where it gets sticky, because if you had a choice, would you stay in a stable? No. You would say, okay, I'm out of here, but where would you go, see? So they made, all they got was a cot and one light bulb in the rooms. And they had to make their own furniture, so that they made nightstands or whatever else out of the lumber that was left over from building the barracks. How many of you have allergies? No, too bad. Okay, so somebody comes along and says, okay, I want you to fill this bag up with hay, and that's going to be your mattress. How would that sit with you? And then you can't go to Costco drugs, or you can't go to CVS, or you can't go to any of the Long's drugstore or wherever you can go. No, it's not available to you. So you got to suck it up. Or you have a choice, you could sleep outside. How many of you do that in the rain, right? This is San Bruno, South San Francisco. You got all that fog and you get rain, okay? All the luggage was spewing out for you to pick up. So the other question I have for you is, how many of you like to get in lines? I've gotten to the point now where if there's a line for anything, I'll avoid just going to that store or getting in line for whatever. And at the restaurant, if I see a long, list of people that's waiting to be seated, I just walk away and say, I'll go someplace else. It's not that good. I'll eat someplace else. So anyway, more line, more line. There's the grandstand and there's the guard tower. And so we were under guard 24/7, of course. And so do you ever get used to being guarded? No. So if you were in this particular camp, how far do you think you have to go to the toilet? How far do you think that they had shower facilities at a racetrack? Maybe not. So these are things that you have to say to yourself, now what do I do? Now what do I do? Do I do this? Do I do that? And so then it's a horrible situation. So my father-in-law, I'll switch gears a little bit here. My father-in-law was born in Japan. He was in the Japanese army for 2 years because of the draft. He changed his last name to accept his wife's name because his wife, my mother-in-law, had 4 women. There were no men in that family. So then in order to continue the legacy of what my mother-in-law had, he had to change his last name to her name. Okay, now here's an interesting question. How many men in here are willing to change your last name to your wife's last name? Well, we got a lot of broken arms or something in here. You guys get to talk about it on the way home, okay? He used to teach a class in chanting, owned a mom and pop store and grocery store in Tacoma, Washington. He was instantly picked up because of the list of things that he's got going. So where did he go first? He was in Tacoma, here. In fact, I'll bet he even came into this building. Now, what's interesting is he gets interrogated over and over again. Why did you change your last name to her name? Are you a spy for the Japanese army? And all of that, and it just went on and on. And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, is that he was interrogated by Korean people. Now, we don't know if the Korean had the language skills to be able to speak Japanese or not. We think they might, but then I don't know if they mistranslated or not. So this just goes down in history that the Korean people interrogated him. So he's in Fort Missoula for a while. That's why I'm attached to Fort Missoula too, is because I'm going to tell my grandchildren, and if I'm old enough or live long enough, tell my great-grandchildren, Fort Missoula is the place to go, because that's where your heritage comes from, because he was there and incarcerated in the camp there. So all of you in this room have a piece of the history, and now we're all together with it, okay? And then he went to Camp Livingston in Arkansas, and then he went to a penitentiary in Crystal City, and then he was released to go to Tule Lake. That's the camp picture at Tule Lake. That's my mother-in-law holding her son, and then her older sister, and that's my wife standing in the front there. There's another sister that went to Japan before the war. What they used to do in the Japanese family is send their child to Japan to keep the grandmother company. Do you think you want to leave your kids with the grandmother? Oh, for a short time, maybe 1 or 2, 3 months, right? If that long. But then the war started. And when the war started, she couldn't come back to the U.S. She was in Hiroshima. And in the process, she was not a witness to the bomb, but she was close by where the bomb was dropped. And so we were, the family was very worried about whether she's going to make it out or not. So this is another story about, the Japanese culture, sending the kid to another country, and then having them come back. So it was terrible. She lived through the whole thing, and she didn't talk about it. It was too hard to talk about it, okay? So now we go from Tanforan back to what we went through, our family went through. There's a place we're gonna go to a place called Topaz. And I said, wait a minute, where is it on the map? Oh, it's so new, it's not even on the map. And it takes a few years before it gets on the map. We just went to the camp last week, and now you could find it on the GPS, but it's really out in the desert, okay? So here we are, all ready to go again. You're getting told to get on the train. When you get on the train, all the shades are pulled down. You can't look out. There's a soldier at every end of the car, rail car. And what they're saying, what it's indicating is, we don't want you to escape. But then on the other hand, you say, well, once you get past Reno, and you think you want to escape out of the train, where do you think you're going to end up? In the desert. So how do you think you're going to survive? So I don't know what they were really worried about. Okay. So here's a picture of the Utah, of course, and then you can see the small triangles, and there were 10 camps that were established. And in the 10 camps, every camp had about a capacity of about 10,000 people. And so this is the locations. You were either in the desert or in the swamps. So if you were in Utah and Hart Mountain and Hunt, Idaho and things like that, you were nowhere, or you were out in a swamp in Arkansas. So can you imagine feeding all these people 3 squares a day, taking care of them? So this is a picture of how the ground looked after they graded it, and this is the water tower that was established. It was the biggest water tower in Utah at that time, 500,000 gallons. But I went to a Topaz reunion, and this idiot comes up to me and he says, yeah, I climbed that tower, the water tower, and I swam in it. And I thought, are you kidding me? Then I thought, oh my God. Now, this may sound humorous, but it isn't, okay? There was a lake that covered all of Utah at one time. It was called Bonneville Lake. And it was really vast. It was thousands and thousands of years ago. Well, somebody pulled a plug on the lake and it drained it, and now we got the Great Salt Lake. But then in the Delta area, where all the water went down, a lot of the water went down, it's all saline water. Okay, so what that means is it's salty. So every time you go to get a drink of water, it's salty water. Shower water is salty. Everything is salty. So what I'm trying to say to you now is, if you have any kind of taste of water that seems funny, you'd throw it out right away. How many of you drink bottled water? How many of you drink filtered water? Okay, you have the privilege of being able to do that right now, so it's fantastic that you could do that. We had no choice. So every time I have a glass of cold water, I am so happy because I had enough of that salt water. Okay. This is the biggest city, or the third biggest city in Utah was Topaz, with a population of about 9,000. And so you got the greeting committee, and you got that gentleman on the right with his hat and coat, and they used to dress quite formally. And then you got this guy with his Levi's, with his cuff, about 6 or 7 inches cuff. And so I said to my daughter, I said, God, that really looks funny. The cuff is so long. Well, Japanese have short legs. Okay, look at this. Okay. So I said, that really looks funny. And my daughter comes back at me and she says, Dad, that's the fashion now, so what are you laughing about? Okay, so this is the way the block was laid out. The red square is the block that we were in. We were in block 27, barrack 4, room E. And on the upper right-hand corner, you have A through F. And A's and F's were up to 3 people maximum. B's and E's were 6 people maximum. And the CDs were 4 people. And if you had a large family, then they'd take the wall out between the 2 rooms, and that's how they got the bigger families. And so then in the next graph down is the way the blocks were laid out. And we had a mess hall, a laundry room, and a rec room. And so let's say that right here is the guard towers, and up here and up there. So this guard sees this Japanese guy approaching the fence. And the guard says, halt or I'll shoot. Halt or I'll shoot 3 times. And then we don't know for sure whether this guy can understand English or not. We don't know if he's hard of hearing or not. He got shot. Shot, dead. And that was a terrible time in the camp because you don't think that your lives are at stake when you get into a situation like this. He's deader than a doornail, okay? And that was unfortunate. And they're trying to work out a memorial for the guy for getting shot. So now the question for you folks is, you're out in the desert, you're in a fenced-in area, you have barracks that are built 2x4s, 1x8s, 1x6. Then you have tar paper on the outside, and the slats are holding the tar paper down. No insulation. In the beginning, there wasn't a ceiling. You could see the rafters. So from one end of the barrack to the other end, you could hear each other. So if somebody was sick, you could hear the moans and groans. If they were an A, you were an F, you could hear it. Okay. And so the funny part of this whole thing is, even though that level of privacy was not available, 399 kids were born in the camp. So what I'm saying is, privacy be damned, we'll do what's natural, right? So here's the picture of the barracks. Now they used, again, they used green lumber to put it together. And so then when the wind blew, the wind blows and then it goes up the floor. And if you're sleeping, you'd be breathing dust. So what people had to do was cover their faces with either towels or t-shirts or whatever, so that then they wouldn't ingest the dust, until they put masonite floors on the floor. Some more barracks. This guy here, I don't know, but he brought his clock with him. You think, you can only take what you can carry, so he brings a clock with him. Okay, and he said, okay, that guy's little bit different. The picture on the right is one of the pictures of the potbelly stove, and they come in two sizes, the small size, and then there's one that's like this, and it's a potbelly. So smart-ass Yukio said, let's light a fire. And so I said, okay, let's put the paper, kindling, coal. How many of you still use coal? How many of you have used coal? Okay, there you go. Now you're showing your age, okay. How many of you heard the word clinker before? And how many of you had to get the clinkers out of the stove because nobody else would do it? See? So it just goes to show you that, you know, we got a few old timers in here. Okay, here's an artist that did this picture. Now, the toilets were lined up side by side, okay? Side by side. And the toilet paper was on the wall. So, if you were to have gone into this toilet area and saw this, what would you do? Oh, no problem. I'll just sit down and do my business and walk away. Yeah, right. Uh-huh. How many of you feel like at least there should have been partitions, right? How about doors? How about locks? Okay, so when you're in your bathroom today, do you shut the door and lock it? Do you at least shut the door? And if you have kids, then you know you're going to have to lock it. Because they don't care. They'll come barging in and say, Mom, what are you doing? And, you know. So this woman here had surrounded herself with cardboard. And that was how she got her own privacy, okay? And some people just wore bags over their heads because they didn't see what's going on around them. They just felt like they're in their inner self, and that's all that mattered to them. And so then they were able to do whatever they're going to do while they're sitting there. Okay, here's another good one. When you go into the shower, the shower heads are lined up right against the wall. And you say to yourself, at this age right now, how many of you can do that and feel like, oh, no problem, I'm free as a bird, I'm okay, I'm not ashamed of my body, therefore I'll do whatever shower I need to do and feel okay about it. Are you kidding me? So, another phase of privacy is taken away from you, and so then you don't have the walls, you don't have the shower door, you don't have the lock, and so you say, this is tough. Some people didn't go to the toilet until late at night because they didn't want to be confronted with other people in the area. You think you're going to get sick if you do that? How many of you will wait until you take a shower at 1 or 2 in the mornings to make sure nobody's there, not knowing that you're going to get hot water or not either, see? So this is some of the dynamics that occurred. Okay, on the upper right-hand corner, how many of you use washboard to wash clothes in your life? Are you kidding? Everybody has washing machines then? Everybody went to laundrettes and things like that? Washboard, okay, I'll ask you another question. Do you know what ivory soap is like, right? At a certain point in time, they advertise that it's pure, it floats in the water and things like that. But how many of you use Instant Fells naphtha? Do you know what that even means? Okay. See, the old timers, they really know. Okay. Thank you. Oh, yeah, everybody in the kitchen were they were on the payroll. We didn't have any contract workers coming from the outside. So they were getting paid about $10 to $15 a month to do what they're doing. My father volunteered to make coffee. So he gets this big vat, puts the bag with the coffee and, soaks it. Then he puts the white powder in and thinking, okay, we're done. We got the coffee made. So somebody tastes it. He put salt in the coffee. See? So you guys are moaning and groaning about the coffee more than your privacy in the toilet or the shower. That's what's funny about this whole thing is, wow, I didn't get a reaction out of the bathroom talk. But as soon as you talk about coffee, it's like it's a big deal, right? So that's again an irony. That's my family picture. I don't know how we got all the clothes that we did. My dad must have packed it all. And that's my grade school picture. And the most popular hairdo was pigtails and bangs. And for the boys, butch haircuts. Okay. And I'll never forget, there were barbers in the camp. Okay. Did they use electric clippers? No way. They used a hand clipper that goes like this. And so then when they dive their hand clipper into your hair without moving it like that, they got a handful of hair and it hurt. So do I have a memory of that? Yes, I do. Okay, when the camp is surrounded by barbed wire fence, then the parents weren't afraid of your child being abducted. The only problem was, if it got dark, how do they find their way home? Because all the barracks look alike, and there's no way that they would know what barrack to get. So they, some people knocked on a lot of doors before they found their own place. One of the things that happened in a camp was that if you had a chronic illness, it's too bad. It's like if you had my cousin in Heart Mountain had ulcers. And so when he goes to what they had maybe was a dispensary, they gave him milk of magnesia. You heard of that before, right? Pepto-Bismol, right? And that's all they gave him. He didn't last that long. He died. And then my other cousin had something with either cataracts or something problem, glaucoma or something. And he was treated in San Francisco by an eye specialist. But as soon as he got into the camp, he lost his eyesight. So if you weren't in fairly decent health at this time, it would be fatal, because the medical technology has gone a long ways. Back then, we were very ignorant of how to deal with the medical issues that came up. And so then a lot of people passed away in the camp because of whatever illness that they had that they couldn't take care of. So, and there wasn't enough medicine of any sort from a technology point of view at that time either. Okay, we had Boy Scouts. We had Boy Scout troop in the camp. And there's the gymnasium. We had flag ceremony before every game. Where did the uniforms come from for football, right? Where did the uniforms come from for baseball and basketball? It was all furnished by all the taxpayers, okay? The teams used to come from outside of Topaz to play against the guys on the Topaz high school team. These are the teachers that were coming into the camp to teach because they were accredited. Now, for grade school and maybe junior high, they were volunteers. And so to this day, I think I had about 3 volunteers teaching me, but because they weren't accredited, they didn't know the nuances of how to teach. And I can blame them for having a learning deficiency. So anyway, my brother was the editor-in-chief of the yearbook. Now, you say, wait a minute, you're in the camp, you got yearbooks? Are you kidding? And so then the woman on the second row, second from the right, that's his future wife, Ayako. Okay. Cap and gown. Can you imagine cap and gowns in the camp? And so then they're all lined up for the yearbooks. Now, here is the most ironic part of the presentation. And I have to read this to you because you can't read it from where you are. So, the questionnaire was put out to all of the men and women of the camp. Are you willing to serve in the armed forces of the United States, combat duty, wherever asked? So he said, that's an interesting question. Would I serve? The next question was, will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States of America and faithfully defend the United States from any or all attack by foreign countries, foreign domestic forces, and forswear any allegiance to or obedience to the Japanese emperor or any other government, power, organization? Now, you're in the camp, you're an American citizen, and you're given this questionnaire. Your constitutional rights have been violated. So how are you going to answer this question? Are you going to be, because you violated my constitutional rights, I don't feel like I need to serve, or you say, I better serve because this is the country that I belong to. So this is what's going on. So we had volunteers, and we had people that got drafted. Okay. So now these guys go off to basic training, and they go into combat. So what happens when you go to combat? You get killed in action, wounded in action, or missing in action, total. How many from Topaz? So there were a lot of guys that went in from all parts of the United States as well as Hawaii. The results of getting in the service during combat is this. There are funerals. We have had funerals inside the camp. And you say to yourself, well, wait a minute. Let's see, they went in the service, they volunteered, or they were drafted, and they're coming back. They're coming back as much as they were wounded, as much as the regular other soldiers were. And so now we have Gold Star mothers and fathers inside the camp, still incarcerated. You say, how can that be? So this is why this is so important for all of us to know how this all came about, because in time of war, we panic. And in the process of getting panicked, we get all kinds of ideas, conspiracy theories, right? So by the time they started going to service, the government said, you know, it doesn't make sense we keep incarcerating these people when we're asking them to go into the service. That's absolutely right. So they said, well, I'll tell you what, let's shut it down. And he said, well, that's simple. Take 100,000 people and just send them back. So you're told you're free to go, and you say, where? Because where you came from, you were fired from your job. Even the Japanese Americans that were in the service got kicked out of the service. They were fired, not fit for military service. And if you were renting, maybe you got kicked out of your house that you were renting. And so then let the first people go, and then they could tell us whether it's comfortable to go back to where we came from. I don't know. Would you be one of the first ones to go to find out? And so then, can you leave all in one day? No. And so the quota was set up. So if you either sign up or you will be signed up. And if you don't sign up, you will be packed, and on the day that you're scheduled to go, you will be escorted out. You'll be given $25 to go back to where you came from, okay? So it's a terrible time, and this is our settlement. We were lucky enough that my dad was sponsored by a jewelry store in Ogden, Utah, and we were able to move to Ogden. So you can see in the upper right-hand corner of the picture, my brother's still in his service uniform, and so here we are now. He doesn't have his uniform on. This is my grade school picture. Not too many Japanese in this picture. So this is my dad working in the jewelry store, and so through many years of legislative effort, Congress accepted what was done to the Japanese Americans was not right. So when you think about it, what happened in 1942 was not recognized until decades later, okay? And so that's sort of the American pattern that occurs, is they'll do something to blemish their reputation, but it takes years to apologize for what they did. So a budget was set up, and we were all given $20,000, but the day that this was signed off for the $20,000, if you had passed away before that date, your family didn't get the money. Okay, so that reduced the amount of liability that the U.S. had. Now, Yasui conviction was overturned. Hirabayashi and Korematsu, all of their charges were cleared, so that then they don't have it on the record anymore. So we say in a panic situation, the Constitution was put aside. U.S. citizens were excluded from protection and were isolated behind barbed wire under military guards. During the Vietnam War, I don't know if you remember in UC Berkeley, they had a lot of protests. They wanted to take all the students that were protesting and put them away into a concentration camp, because you don't protest against the United States the way they did in UC Berkeley, but there was a lot of strong feelings. And then during the Gulf War, they thought about rounding up all the Muslims, right? And what I say when I show this one is, if you go to Arlington Cemetery, you'll see a lot of Muslim markers of the soldiers that died for the United States there. And so this is where you say, hey, does that seem right? So there are a lot of Muslim soldiers that are in the service even right now. And so, to say that you're going to round them up. Now, why weren't the Germans rounded up during the Second World War? How many Germans were in the United States in 1942? How about a couple million, right? How are you going to put 2 million people away? How about the Italians, right? There were several 100,000 Italians. How are you going to put all those people away? So then they said, well, what we ought to do is we ought to put the Japanese away, because they're the easiest people to identify, and we'll just put them away, and that'll be the sign that we're doing something to protect the United States. Well, That didn't work either. There's a detention camp near Livermore, which is in the Bay Area, and it's ready to go. It's a compound that's surrounded by barbed wire, and the barracks are all set to go, just in case some people need to be put away. Okay. Okay. Here's my brother on the right was the oldest brother. He was in the military intelligence. He got to Japan right when the war was over. So then he was looking at letters coming in and letters going out to make sure that there wasn't any more conspiracy that's going on. My brother on the left was attached to the Marines. He was in the U.S. Army. He got attached to the Marines, and he went up to, and in the 1950s, MacArthur said that we need to go up to the Yalu River and take over North Korea, and if we need to, we'll go beyond the Yalu River. Well, my brother got captured, and he was a prisoner of war for 6 months. Luckily, it was only 6 months. But the damage that he experienced was that he had PTSD. And at that time, we didn't know what PTSD was. All we knew was that he was an emotional, unstable person sometimes. And he had a hair trigger temper. And so whenever he got a little bit hot, you had to walk around on eggshells so that then you don't upset him. Now, the reason why my picture is the biggest one there is because my family put this whole thing together, and I said, hey, I like this picture. I like it this size. And so I served in Korea for a year. And so the three of us went to camp. You say, whoa, wait a minute. If you went to camp and the three of you went into the service, how come? And you have to think about that. The United States is the greatest country in the world. You know that, and I know that. And we all experience the privileges of being in the United States, living the lifestyle that we're living, even though we have to pay taxes, even though we have a lot of politics bullshit that's going on, and leadership sometimes that are sort of wacky, but we get to live the kind of lives that we're living, and we have the privilege of living in a state of mind that we feel safe. We don't have people with AR-15s walking around in the neighborhood, airports, or anything like that. So my feeling is, yeah, I did go to a concentration camp. If I had a choice to go back in the service and defend the country, I probably would, but at 88, I don't think they'll want me. So anyway, there's a couple of words I want to just help with concentration camp versus concentration camp. The reason why I did this, I reserved the capital C in the concentration camp for the people that went to in the German atrocities, okay? There's a big difference between what happened in the concentration camp in the United States and in Germany. There's just no comparison. But a Jewish group of people got together and they objected to the fact that the Japanese were using concentration camp to describe what's going on. And so then they got the leadership group from the American, Japanese side and the Jewish side, and they talked about it. And what they concluded was, anytime your freedom is taken away, your privacy is taken away, and you're incarcerated and things like that, it's a concentration camp. And so then the Jewish people said, okay, you guys can use it from now on. That's why I'll use it, but I'll use the lowercase c to say concentration. And so you got, we talked about Tantran, Delta, Topaz, Tule. I can go into more stories, but I think you reach your saturation point too, so I'll hold it up. The 442nd and the 100th Battalion, They were the most decorated combat soldiers in Europe. And the interesting thing about this, why was the Japanese soldiers separated from the rest of the American soldiers? The Japanese Americans is what I meant to say. In the beginning, they didn't want the American soldiers, Caucasian soldiers, to be shot in the back from the Japanese American soldiers that were in the service. They found out that worry was gone in a very short time. So they were going at it side by side. So even in the process of getting drafted and things like that, there was not the complete trust until later on. And so once the trust was built, then no problem. Again, the Constitution violation. This is my oldest son standing, my second son, and my daughter. I lost my wife in July of 2020, and so I dedicate what I'm sharing with you about my wife and my mom and dad. So this is a family picture that we took, and we have a mixed race family, and I'm very proud of all of them. So this is it. Thank you very much for your attention. I really appreciate it. I think there's some people that got grabbed, especially about the coffee, but I'll let that one go. But thank you for your attention. If you have any questions that you have, please don't hesitate, and I'll try to keep my nose out of it, keep it flat as possible. So.
Do you want to do a couple questions?
Sure.
So we'll take a couple questions. I know we're running a little long, but we'll take a few questions here, and then I think Tate would like to say something on behalf of the Heritage Hall here. So, you have a question?
Have you recorded your history and your story so we don't forget about this in another 25 years?
Have I recorded it? My daughter is hounding me to death to write something down, and I'm hesitating because I feel like that's the last thing I'm going to do, and that after that. So at one level I'm joking, but then on the other hand, I'm due to do that, and as well as I got to do my legal work too, making sure there's a trust and everything else before I go. So thank you for reminding me of what my daughter wants me to do.
In that 1944 survey that was distributed, do you remember when you were in Delta the conversations about it? And if people answered no to question 27 and 28, were they sorted out and brought to a different place?
A good question. The people that wrote no, they were the no boys. So then they had to take themselves out of the camp and go to Tule Lake. And the Tule Lake people that said yes came over to Topaz. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is that the no-nos were shipped out to Japan, some of them. And so then there was some real outcomes to the way that they answered the question. So it wasn't a trivial kind of question. It had some serious implications because the U.S. government did not want the no-nos to stay because they were dangerous. Now, in Tule Lake, there were two kinds of people that ended up there. There were some people that were still loyal to Japan. There's no doubt about that. But there were people there that felt like their constitution was violated, and so then they chose to go that way, to go to Tule Lake and take the full brunt, rather than to say yes because they were still incarcerated. So it was a very dynamic time, and a lot of chaos, and it was tough times for a lot of people. Good question, though. So I'm telling you folks now, Go ahead.
In your personal experience or in your research afterwards, have you encountered internee families who had sons fighting on both the American and the imperial sides during the war? And if so, what was the general experience afterward, reconciliation or estrangement?
It's an interesting question. I can't say that there weren't any, but there must have been a few. And unfortunately, both the men are embedded with thought processes to defend their own country. But I don't know if the blood relativeness kept them from shooting each other. It's a hard question. I'd have to really do some homework to. If you want to know more information, you can always look it up in WikiLeaks, okay? And they'll give. It has a lot of information, a lot of pictures, and so. And then the other thing is, if you want to go see how desolate things were, you could go to Tule Lake also and look at the campsite there. Because what you're going to find out is it's as desolate as some of the Montana country. I say desolate because it's not livable at one level, see. So it's a real interesting kind of life that we went through for the few years that we were in a camp. Okay. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Stubborn Twig, the Yukio family stories book? It's an excellent book about the Japanese internment, what happened to a particular family in Oregon. And it's called Stubborn Twig. And, yeah, and it's the Yukio family story. I can't remember the first name of the author, but it's an excellent book.
Oh, Japanese are stubborn.
Yeah.
We have a copy. Yeah, I'll share it. We have a copy at the office. I'm happy to, I'll make sure to share that with them.
Yeah, you should read it and recommend it to you.
Okay, appreciate that. There's a lot of stories. There's no doubt. I'm just a storyteller for people who are moderately curious. Okay. And then if you walk away with new information, I'm happy. And so when I talked to the class this morning, I said, "Did you learn anything new?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Thank you very much. That's all I can ask for." So, yeah.
Do you do this presentation at any public schools?
Yes, I can. I've done it at public schools, Rotary clubs, churches, private homes, universities, colleges. I'll do it wherever they want me to come. Yeah. It's.
Have you done it in Morgan Hill?
That's an interesting question. I just went to the Morgan Hill Library just recently, and I have a date set for May the 6th at 1 o'clock to do Morgan Hill Library. And I went to, I don't know if you're familiar with San Mateo County in South San Francisco. They have 13 libraries. And they said, "Would you like to do 13 libraries?" And I said, "I'll have to think about that." So the answer is yes, I'm going to do it in Morgan Hill. So, okay, thank you. You know anybody there?
I grew up there.
Huh?
I grew up there.
You did? Why did you leave? We miss you.
When I lived there, there was one stoplight.
Yeah. You'd be surprised what it looks like now. It's too big for me. Oh, this has been fun. And I hope it's been fun for you and a little bit educational. Because unless it's a little fun, it gets too damn serious. And so I appreciate the laughter and salt in the coffee. And what was the other one? No, that's it. Thank you.
And I promise we'll get you out of here. And by all means, there are still cookies left and strawberries, so please grab one on your way out. But if you want to step up quick, Nate Jones is the director of the Rocky Mountain Museum of Military History and the president of the Northern Rockies Heritage Center.
Well, I hate to issue directives, and somebody maybe hit the lights and get enough darkness half the year. So thank you very much.
Oops.
Very much like to express our appreciation to Mr. Shimomura, Historical Museum in Fort Missoula, and Humanities Montana for making this possible tonight. So much of our interpretive effort among all three historical agencies here in Fort Missoula is devoted to remembrance of a conflict which changed our world and continues to shape our lives today. So when we have someone who was affected by personally and a participant in those years, we are very much a privileged audience to be able to hear from them. And so on behalf of that, on behalf of the Northern Rockies Heritage Center, we'd like to give you an appreciation.
Thank you very much. This is a bonus. Aside from salt in the coffee, this is a bonus. Thank you very much.